Thank you very much, and it's great to be here in Vermont. Vermont's been calling out to me for a while, but I've been slightly disappointed to discover over the course of the last 24, 36 hours that you guys have got a pretty significant cheese problem going on in the county. I'm a bit of a cheese kind of lovey, and I was saying to Michael before actually that I'm a bit worried that the whole 18 minutes of this talk is going to be taken up with Vermont cheese general discussion rather than the Museum of What We Don't Yet Know, but we'll see in general how that goes. But yeah, so the cheese thing is wonderful and disturbing. I found myself yesterday at Marble House. It's been great that Marble House has looked after us so well. But Sarah left out a block of cheese. This is obviously not remotely relevant to the talk, but let's just call this preamble. I'm kind of sharing with you in a sort of guilty, secret way. Obviously not so secret. So there was this slab of cheese left on the kitchen table, and I felt like I wanted to sit down and eat significant amounts of this cheese. But I kind of felt guilty about people coming in and finding me, so I sort of had this, and obviously I sort of regard myself as an explorer, so I decided to explore the house in a sort of series of elliptical ways and directions and up and down and all the rest of it. But I found, obviously, I was drawn to the kitchen on each kind of traverse through the house, and I'd just take a little slab of cheese on my way through. And I hadn't read the programme, which is a problem. So I stuffed myself with cheese last night and this morning, and maybe between 2 and 3 a.m. a little bit as well. Thinking, great, I'm going to fill myself up with cheese, and then that's going to be it, and I'm going to come do the talk, and then it's going to be nice to meet all these lovely people, and then we'll go away, and that'll be that. And then I realised that there's a whole cheese luncheon going on here as well. So anyway, the way I regard it is that it's not my problem, it's your problem. So if you could please deal with this in a kind of progressive way, that would be great. So I should probably talk about the other stuff as well. The Museum of What We Don't Yet Know. Why this title? Why the museum? Why what we don't know? Let me start by coming around at the issue, maybe a little bit. So I was born in Gibraltar. For those of you who, I'm sure a lot of you do know Gibraltar. I've heard of the Straits of Gibraltar. At the very least, Gibraltar is a little place. It's a kind of peninsula stuck on the end of Spain. It's an old kind of colony. It's part of a legacy of empire and so on. And I grew up there as a kid. And I did a talk a couple of weeks ago, and the guy who was presenting me sort of referred to Gibraltar for the first time in the context of me. And it's interesting because I don't really regard myself as Gibraltarian. So, and he said that for him, a lot of kind of what I do, what we do as the Clipperton Project, maybe goes back to my childhood in the sense that Gibraltar is a massive port. It's the entry, the gateway to the Mediterranean. So as a kid, I must have seen people come in and out, and sailors and journeying and horizon and all the rest of it. So he felt, as part of his introduction, that maybe this was kind of a little bit what sort of informed my my kind of itinerant needs, ways, and so on. And it was kind of live at the beginning of that talk that I thought, and I hadn't really considered it before, and I sort of went back, and it was really interesting before hearing Dana talk about pictures, because I went back into the pictures of my childhood, and I don't remember boats. I mean, I remember little boats, but I don't remember big boats. I don't remember sailors. I don't remember kind of transient communities or horizons. But what I do remember is that the frontier was closed at the time. So Gibraltar was, at the time when I was a kid, was kind of just post-Franco. The frontier was closed. There was the beginnings of a democracy, but there was still kind of major conflict around there. And every Sunday, my mum would take me to the border, and then on this kind of little tricycle, I'd go up and down the frontier, backwards and forwards. And I have this very clear image of the border, of Sundays in the heat with this kind of dusky grass, dry smell, and then looking across the border to the other side and seeing other kids doing the same thing, backwards and forwards. And everything that was part of my narrative, what I was being told was, they're different to you, they're distinct, they think differently, they don't like you. That was a nice way of saying it. They despise you, they suspect you, do not make friends, do not attempt to establish bridges with them. But all I saw as a 7-year-old kid was, that kid looked the same as me. He was kind of on pretty much the same bike, doing the same thing, looking over at me, wondering what it was that we were doing on the other side of the border. And I think that, in a way, going back and thinking about this live at the beginning of that last talk, is what sort of informs me more. It's not about horizon, in a way. It's not about journeying or distance or movement. It's about borders. It's about breaking down barriers. And I think ultimately maybe it ends up feeling like the same thing, but it's not. I think sometimes journeying for the sake of you is kind of pyrrhic, it's solipsistic, it's needy. I mean, selfies, I'm not a huge fan of selfies. I did, here I am, here I stand, look at me contextually, geographically, and so on. But I think if it's the reverse, if it's movement in order to open gaps, to build bridges, to stretch beyond, that's the kind of movement that I think that I'm massively interested in, and that I think is hugely of value. Worth saying at this point, yeah, I am going to talk about exploration, I am going to talk about journeying, about discovery, but it's also really important to kind of contextualize and say that the history, this is not rocket science, the history of exploration is not a positive history. The history of exploration is white man, flag, saying, I like the look of this, that's kind of spangly over there, she's quite pretty, let's go, let's take it back somewhere else. I am going to devour, I'm going to rape, I'm going to pillage for my own personal gain. So the kind of exploration we do is very much an antithesis to that, is a reaction against that history rather than a continuation of that history. And that's a kind of the space we fundamentally inhabit, or try to inhabit. I'm not saying we succeed, and this goes back to a number of the other talks today, I think, as well. I think nobody should be standing up here or any kind of plinth and saying we have succeeded. We should just be saying we have attempted. We have given it a shot. We have made our best effort, and then let's see how the chips fall and move on from there. So yeah, we do journey. We move beyond, we deliberately kind of inhabit different spaces. We journey towards the horizon. This kind of concept of the horizon is incredibly useful because it frees us. It allows us to move beyond our immediate space. It allows us to remove the blinkers a little bit from what it is that we're doing, from our kind of immediate concerns and aspirations, I think, and so on. And again, the journeys can never be about us. The journeys can never be about us achieving. It's one of the reasons why we sort of often don't have an end point in the journey. The journey has to be kind of organic, has to be allowed to meander. Again, this is not new, and a number of speakers have spoken about this today. And the other key thing is, obviously, these journeys have to be able to be used for something else. They have to exist beyond that space. And that's where I think is where our valuable, if there is any valuable work that we do, I think that is where it is valuable. It's when we bring those notions back. It's when we do ridiculous things. It's when we risk. I'll talk about risk in a bit. It's when we risk and we come back and we go, wow, didn't think we were going to do that. Didn't think we were going to get there. Didn't think we were going to be able to get there, certainly without any kind of damage, collateral damage, difficulty and so on. Then we come back and then we look at the young person and say, we did that ridiculous thing. But you know what that means? That means you can. That means you imagine, you create, you decide who it is you want to be, and then join the dots between the two of them, between those 2 points. There are various definitions of that kind of separate us from the animal kingdom, some quite interesting, some trite. The one that I think that interests me most is the fact that I think we are probably the only species that can imagine ourselves, that can create ourselves, that can decide, not in a kind of economic, sort of sexual, immediate, how big is our house kind of way, but in a kind of conceptual sense of ourselves. What are our values? Maybe not what are our values. What do we want our values to be? How do we imagine civilization to be? So not civilization now as what we are, but what might civilization be in the future? That's all about journeying. Those notions are all about journeying, about voyaging, about joining the dots between 2 points. And once we establish that over there, beyond ourselves, how do we attempt to get there? How do we make that? How do we attempt that journey? Of course, for all of these journeys, we need a vessel. It's interesting, sometimes people sort of say to me, why are you obsessed with that island? Or particularly kind of Clipperton, because that was the first journey we did. Or why are you obsessed with that space? Or why do you always go on sailboats? I mean, we don't always go on sailboats, but we predominantly use sailboats. And the interesting thing is that, I'm not the front up now as well. I get seasick, so I don't really enjoy these sailboat journeys really very much at all. But I kind of have coping mechanisms around that. But the sailboat really, in a kind of earthly narrative, is the only useful vessel. I mean, space is different and that offers the same thing. But on Earth, that's the only useful vessel that allows us to step beyond ourselves. Land does not offer this to us anymore. Even the Amazon, even Kilimanjaro or Everest, certainly Everest doesn't anymore at all. Maybe it's about our feet. Maybe that's a problem. Maybe that's wherever we tread, wherever we step, we are comfortable. We recognize how this feels. And it doesn't feel as though we're weightless. It doesn't feel as though we're lost. So the vessel is obviously crucial in and of itself, but also in terms of what it offers us, in terms of narrative. And of course, this is safe, unsafe that was being mentioned before, but a lot of our journeying has to transfer to other notions, so interdisciplinary activity, so working with folk from different countries, from different disciplines, from different industries is quite important. And for me, it's been a massive learning curve as well. And again, I think early on, we got it massively wrong. Early on, I understood interdisciplinary activity to be you put a physicist together with a writer or with a journalist, and you try and get them to talk. That was an utter failure. It was very naive of me to assume that would happen. When you do that ordinarily, not all the time, but when you do that ordinarily, what happens is somebody arrives at that particular point with their own prejudices, with their own background, and then they attempt to invade that space. Whereas actually, if you separate that and actually allow interdisciplinary activity to become something beyond that, something internal. So maybe a sense of community, which I'd like to sort of throw at you, is this idea of community not being across people, but maybe being internal. If we link up with different points of ourselves, maybe that will allow us to link up with other people also. And I mentioned the risk element before as well. Risk is key. We're not risking. I don't think there's any kind of other space, there's any kind of space that we're kind of productively moving into. We did a particular journey with some NASA scientists a while ago. And the reason I want to mention this is just because I had a particular job, which was kind of looking at these, the two divers who were heading down to look for these Ascidians down below, and kind of, I was looking for sharks as well a little bit, which kind of made my palms sweat. But we'll gloss over that because I don't really like talking about it. And kind of sort of waving up to make sure that everything was all right and so on. But as kind of ordinarily occurs when I'm in these sort of uncomfortable spaces, what actually happened was I got distracted. I got distracted by bubbles, by the bubbles coming up from beneath me, from what they were breathing. So I had a shark come or a barracuda or whatever, I wouldn't have been much use. And I started taking photographs of the bubbles. I started getting obsessed by the beauty of the bubbles. I was swimming in and around and above them, trying to take the best. I'm no photographer either, I hasten to add, but it was wonderful to have this opportunity. So I carried on taking these photos, and gradually as I took these photos, I realized I wasn't taking photos of the bubbles. I was taking photos of myself. And it was only by having inhabited, again, this sort of safe, unsafe space, this difficult, distinct space, that there was a moment where I realized that actually the point of me being there was in some kind of way to realize about the ephemerality of what it is that we are, of what it is that we're doing. And of course, I went back to the Scream, to Edvard Munch's Scream. And then I started thinking about other pieces of work. Any photo we've ever taken, and I started looking at them as though they were self-portraits too. And I sort of realized that maybe a way of looking at all art, a way of looking at all work, is through the prism of self-portrait. And of course, it comes to a kind of educational notion as well, because if we see, maybe we don't understand, maybe we don't live something as viscerally as if we are that thing, as if this gaze is ours. If this is a bird looking back at us, what's the use in that? If this is a gannet saying, here I am gannet, I am bird, that's no use. But if this is an accusatory look, if this is us looking back at ourselves, back at the photographer saying, I am you, we are all one, the detritus on a beach, the plastic on a beach is not something we've left there, but is actually us, is actually within us, as it is within the pipe that is in this particular gannet. This gannet swallowed a pipe. This is one of the more pleasant pictures that I can show of what we find on the world's oceans, on the world's beaches, and in attempting to excrete the pipe, died. You can see it in its kind of posterior. And it brings me to education, of course, as well. That if we tell, if we insist, this comes to museums as well, if we show, if we demonstrate, if we put something between us and a glass screen, and we say, this is information for you to take away, that's fine, we'll take it away, we'll learn it, we'll regurgitate it come exam time, but I'm not sure we live it. I'm not sure this hand sort of reaches into our intestines and twists us and makes us really understand what it is that's taking place here. And I think it's a thing which informs all of our programs, all of our educational work internationally, is getting young people to do. I taught for 7 or 8 years after university, and fundamentally I left. I mean, this has been done in TED and TEDx before, but how education is perhaps the worst possible system to actually inform and educate our young people. And I'd like to posit at this particular point in time as well, good word, posit, used by Mr. Kogan before today as well, perhaps a nice way of measuring educational merit might not be how maths is understood or how sums are added up or what algebraic equation is completed, but smiles in a day. That's my That's what I'd like to see in our schools. How many times can we see our young people do and smile in a day and allow them to educate themselves within that particular context? It's why we're obsessed with Horizon. It's what frees us up about Horizon, about this notion of something beyond ourselves. We don't know where we're going. I think that's fine. Anybody who it's kind of a whole objective-led culture that we exist within, that's okay, but I don't buy it. I don't buy that any of us actually fundamentally know where it is that we're headed and so on. But I think that's the beauty of the thing. We're here for a brief glimpse of time. I mean, I know the United States kind of understands itself in a kind of contemporary white context as quite a new nation, but really in the grand scheme of things, Rome was 6 hours ago, Greece was yesterday. We are nothing of what we've done, but we are everything ahead. We are full of possibility. We are full of potential. And I think I know this is what absolutely informs everything that we do in terms of the notions that we argue, in terms of what we push people towards. It's not towards any kind of knowledge that we have. I don't believe in knowledge. It might be a controversial point at this particular stage late in the day. But what is knowledge? Look, if there is one constant in the history of science, it's the 1% becoming the 99%. Galileo was lucky he didn't get burnt before his position was actually proved. Einstein, there's a whole host of others. Accidents, Alexander Fleming, lysozyme. He left it, he went away for the weekend, he came back, something else was there that he didn't expect to be there. It's all a series of accidents, and that's kind of okay. It's the risking, it's the daring to fail that takes us beyond ourselves, that allows us, that opens up opportunity into different spaces and so on. I just want to leave you with a thought. I got an email the other day from a friend who came on a journey with us way back when, and it was a very matter-of-fact email, as British emails tend to be, and it just said, I've lived my life. I have inoperable pancreatic cancer. I have weeks left to live. This is not meant to be a negative point. This is not meant to be depressing, because what she established in that very short communication with me, which may be the last communication we had, is we are not here for long. Does that limit our potential? Does that limit our ambition? Or does that suddenly open up the horizon? Does that open up a panorama for us to do what we can, to make the most of our brief time here? So that others perhaps, not to build ourselves up into some kind of omnipotent deity, but so that others might say, wow, all of that's possible. I can. I'm going to give something a shot. Thank you very much.